first question or the first thing that I've seen a lot is people want to know about watering that seed. So let's go back to when you first started. And what I've seen a lot of advice of is right after someone aerates and overseeds, I will see advice of, hey, don't water too much. You don't want to create fungus in there, or you don't want to do that. There's some sort of thing now where people are backing down and saying, don't water too much. Here's the thing, though, and I get it. You don't want to water too much, okay? I understand. You don't want to cause puddling. You don't want to cause runoff. You don't want that. But what I know from working with homeowners and DIYers for so many years here online, and also when I worked at ChemLawn for 15 years, talking to a lot of homeowners and folks that had seedings done or that they did themselves, most people don't water enough. They just don't. So I usually go from that more conservative view where I say, I want you to water a lot, water heavy, water it, water, right? I push people to push hard because I know where they kind of start from as a whole. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be people that are overwater. There are. I used to see people in Chicago that would literally leave their sprinkler on all day, every single day, all day in their front yard. In Chicago, and I don't know if it's this way anymore, but in the city of Chicago proper, water was free. I'm using air quotes here, but there's something to do with, I'm sure they pay it in another way, right, in some other tax. But it's Lake Michigan water, which is the best water in the world. If you ever want to know why all the craft beers up around Lake Michigan are also legendary and good, especially I'm talking like Three Floyds and that, it's because they have Lake Michigan water. It's the best water that there is. And that's also why the pizza is so good in Chicago, is because of the dough. And I can tell you that the reason the dough is so perfect is because of that good Lake Michigan water. That's why Chicago is known for its pizza. So just take that as it may. The water means everything. So people in Chicago would water for hours, right? So I know there's extremes on every end of the spectrum, but there are people as a majority, when you tell them to water a lot, they won't hit the mark, okay? So that's where I say I got to understand where I'm coming from, and it's always to tell people to water a lot. Now, what happens though is, and by the way, I've also tried to change up some of my language recently. Instead of saying water a lot, I will try to say this, because you don't know. You just don't know how much water someone's going to need. You don't know what kind of sprinkler system they have. Are they moving sprinklers around? What's the coverage of the sprinkler? How long does it take? Is it in a full circle? Is it in a half? You just don't know, right? So to tell somebody water 10 minutes, 10 minutes at a time for 3 times a day, that doesn't mean anything. 10 minutes at a time in a rotary sprinkler that's got to go full circle, you'll get nothing measurable, right? So it's tough. So what I've tried to tell people is, water your lawn so that it's wet, and then go stick your finger down in the grass. This is when you first, seed. Stick your finger down in the dirt, and it should feel wet at the first top half inch. Just scratch through. If you don't feel the water in there, then you know you didn't water enough. Just take it up. So you want to keep the top half inch of soil constantly wet all the time for the first, 14 to 21 days, couple 2-3 weeks. Now, once you get past that, you're going to see that your grass started growing around day 5 to day 10, sometime in there. And we're going to talk about areas that don't grow versus areas that do grow. But for right now, just think about that. When you get to that couple 2-3 weeks, you got to change your watering habits now, because you have a little bit different thing going on. And the strategy of the grass now isn't to germinate. The strategy of the grass is to put down a root and throw up a blade so photosynthesis can start to occur, and it can start to kind of make its own food and start to live on its own and not have to rely on the nutrient and everything that's been in that grass seed, right? This is also why we put the starter fert and everything there, so it's in the soil ahead of time and sitting there and waiting. And, so that's kind of how that works along. But you want to change your watering strategy now. So think about it. If the grass plant is needing to put down a root, you want to use water to help it. Water is a great traveler. Think about the Grand Canyon was created by water. Water erodes everything. It'll do all kinds. You've seen it. You've seen, if you're lucky enough to get a heavy rain, you see what water will do to erode the dirt away, right? Well, now that you're putting some roots in there, let's put the water in deeper. Now, don't saturate it. Don't have anything running off. But let's water longer so the water will dive down deeper. That's why the soil's been loosened anyway from aeration or whatever else you're doing, adding in carbon. So get that water to go deeper and allow those roots to chase it down. So at that point, then, that's when the tuna can challenge comes in. Because what I can't do is understand everybody that's listening to this podcast. I can't understand your specific site, how much sun you have versus shade, what your soil composition is, again, your watering setup, how much water it gets down. I can't what the cloud cover has been in your place, because all of these things will affect the way the watering works. So I can't do that. But what I can do is talk to you in terms of the tuna can challenge, which is to put that tuna can out there in each zone that you have to move to and understand how long it takes to get a ½ inch of water down. Because that's what I would say that you should do around that 2 to 3 week mark, is change your watering to less frequent and more deep, less frequent and deep. So there isn't a perfect formula to that, but if you've been watering, say, 3 times a day to get the top ½ inch down, then maybe what you're going to do is you're going to back down now and do a ½ inch each time and water in the morning and the afternoon only. Back it down slow. But always use that finger test. You should start feeling that water, or that depth of that water down in those areas. You should start feeling that down deeper now, a couple 2 inches down. Get that water deeper. That's the idea, is to cut it back, the frequency, but make sure that you're going deep to help encourage that rooting. And by the way, a ½ inch of water may not be enough. You may need to put down even more because of your soil type, or because of the amount of sun you're getting, or no rain help. So you'll have to kind of adjust this, and you'll have to feel your way through it, literally by sticking your finger into the lawn and just feeling after a watering, am I getting this watering deep? I think of it this way. People talk about, well, how do I transition that? How do I know how to do that transition by backing it down? So think of it this way. I love this analogy of, how do you boil a frog, right? And this is, I'm gonna get you to reverse engineer this in your mind. So how do you boil a frog? Well, you've heard the analogy that if the water's already boiling and you throw a frog in it, the frog feels that boiling water, and as soon as he gets in that water, bam, he flings himself out, and it doesn't boil him. He gets out of it because he just feels it immediately, bam, and he's out. So the way you boil a frog, though, is you put him in lukewarm water, and then you put it on a burner and you bring the heat up slowly. And because those temperature adjustments are so slow, he doesn't feel it. He just gets used to it. He just adapts to it until all of a sudden he's boiling, and now it's too late. So let's reverse engineer that to the grass. You've had the grass at this rolling boil where it's just wet, 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 bam, 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 water, 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 right? Just keep that top inch wet, keep that top ½ inch wet, right? Bam, bam, bam. Well, now what you need to do is reverse engineer that and back it off the same way that frog got boiled, but the other way around. Back it off slow so the lawn doesn't realize you're backing it off. In other words, it doesn't realize, hey, I was getting watered all the time. No. Now you know what I got to do? I just got to adapt, because the water's deeper now and not as frequent. So I'm going to adapt, and the roots are going to chase that down. So just do it the opposite of boiling that frog. Take it off slowly over time, step by step. So the idea being that what you're not going to do is just take the lawn off the watering completely all in one day, because then we'll get a hot day and it'll boil the lawn right out, right? You don't want to do that. You want to do the exact opposite. You want to back it down nice and slow over time. And while you're backing it down, water deeper so that it has to adapt and move the roots deeper along with the watering that you're giving it.